Hey, this is Marshall and Jackson for the Seattle Sports Soup. Just getting into our first podcast. Looking to do this 2 times a month, just give you an update on Seattle sports. We got a good show coming up for you today. Talking a little bit about the Seahawks matchup with the Falcons, the big Sonics news, and everything Huskies from football to basketball. And first off, I just want to start out with the Seahawks and just talk about the huge matchups in that game. I know it's headlined by the defense and the defense of the Seahawks and the offense of the Falcons. You know, the two powers of each teams. And Jackson, what's your take on the key matchups in this game?
Well, obviously the biggest matchup is the Seahawks secondary versus the Falcons elite receivers and tight end. The Falcons got Julio Jones and Roddy White on the outside. That's arguably the best wide receiver duo in the NFL. Combine that with Tony Gonzalez, who is the best tight end of all time. So that's going to be a really interesting matchup to see how the Hawks match up with Sherman, Browner, Chancellor, and Thomas. I think you probably have to put Browner on Jones because of the pure size. Julio Jones, he's a monster on the outside. He's 6'3", 6'4". Yeah. And Browner's got that physicality to put him down. And that way you could put Earl Thomas over the top on that side, give him some help. But with Sherman, if you put him on Roddy White, you can hopefully shut him down. Sherman having a great season, you can shut him down over there. And then Cam Chancellor, he can be playing some zone over there, but he can probably be playing some man on Tony Gonzalez also. And that's, well, obviously Tony Gonzalez gets the advantage on pretty much anyone. It's still a better matchup for us than most other teams because of Chancellor's size. He's 6'3", and he's just a bus over there. So it's a better matchup than a lot of teams would have.
I also think that I think the Browner matchup with Julio Jones is good too because Browner's kind of still getting his feet under him from his 4-game suspension, and I think an all-pro safety like Earl Thomas will be able to help out over there. And speaking about all-pro, the Seahawks had 4 guys named to the first team all-pro today, which is Max Unger, Richard Sherman, Earl Thomas, and
Marshawn Lynch.
Marshawn Lynch, of course. And, that's huge news, too, because, of course, Sherman got snubbed from the Pro Bowl. I'm sure that'll just create more of a chip on his shoulder. But I think this matchup with the Falcons works out. I think it works out well for kind of both teams. That both strengths match up and then both weaknesses with the Seahawks offense, which is becoming less of a weakness as they've just shown their firepower in the recent weeks, and the Falcons defense, which is they're all right. They're 28th in the league against the run though, so I think the Hawks will look to exploit that. So
yeah, that's definitely something that the Hawks will look to do with the newfound read option with Wilson and Lynch is definitely going to be a way to exploit the Falcons. And another interesting matchup would be the Falcons' defensive line against the Hawks' offensive line. And normally I might call it a toss-up, but John Abraham, the star perennial Pro Bowl defensive end for the Falcons, has an ankle injury, and throughout the week he was questionable. He is going to play, but the ankle injury is still definitely going to be lingering and bothering him, and so planting off to rush the passer and against the run, I think he'll definitely be weaker, which definitely helps Okung and the whole offensive line over there.
Yeah, so make sure to look for that. And also, I think after seeing the Seahawks come out pretty slow last week and get down 14-0, that I don't think we'll see that as much this week as kind of the conditions of the field. You know, the FedEx field was just terrible. It gets torn ACLs all over the place. But I think in the Georgia Dome it should be prime conditions for both teams. So look for it to be a fair start.
Yeah, and so we'll obviously exploit them with the run game, but that indoor turf field will definitely make the game faster, and I think that'll really show in the passing game. And I'm interested to see how the Hawks' passing game will go against the Falcons because the Falcons' secondary, that's definitely the strength of their defense. They have 2 good corners in Dante Robinson and Asante Samuel and a couple good safeties also. Dante Robinson and Asante Samuel both had lingering injuries in Week 17 of the regular season, but the extra week off the Falcons got with the bye, I'm sure those guys are going to be ready to go to match up against Sidney Rice and Golden Tate. So we'll see how that matchup goes.
Yeah, and both passing games are going to be interesting to watch for tomorrow. Also, news came out today that Gus Bradley was interviewing with the Eagles. I'm pretty sure he interviewed with them today, and apparently Darrell Bevell is going to have an interview with the Bears. Both interviews happening in Atlanta, and Russell Wilson said he's praying for Darrell Bevell to stay, as I'm sure a lot of Hawks fans are now, but weren't at the beginning of the season with that play calling. But I think right now he's exploiting the read option, kind of. He's opening up the playbook for Russell Wilson, and Russell Wilson's showing his true skills.
Yeah, the offense has obviously been improving over the last weeks, and a lot of credit goes to Darrell Bevell in the play calling. And so these interviewing that he's going to do is not only important for next year, because we obviously want him back, but for this week, the preparation for this week, because normally those coordinators are going to be focusing all their time, putting in 30, 40, maybe even 50 hours to set up a game plan. But that extra time that Darrell Bevell has to take to go do interviews is definitely taken away from his preparation time. So I'm interested to see whether it is a big distraction and whether the offense comes out hot or flat as it did last week against the Redskins.
Yeah, talking about the distractions, I think the coaching distractions are kind of, they're not a huge problem, but they definitely add to, they affect the players and their mental mindsets. And I also think the travel across the country, I wouldn't put a huge deal into the travel, but the time of the start for the game being at 10 a.m. West Coast time, I think that might have a little bit of an impact. But I wouldn't look for it to play too heavily into the outcome of the game.
Yeah, but one of the other big storylines that's been developing starting on last Sunday is Chris Clemens' ACL injury, and he's officially torn his ACL and he's out for the season, which really is a big loss because Clemens is definitely the Seahawks' best player on the front seven, and he plays the majority of the snaps. He plays something like 80% of the snaps, which is the highest percentage out of any of the other defensive linemen on the team. And while it is a big loss, it's a really big opportunity for Bruce Irvin to see if he can come in and show that he's not just a pass rusher and show that he can be a more complete player. And so we'll see how that goes because while Atlanta is more of a passing team now, they still have been able to run the ball in the past with Michael Turner. So we'll see how that goes running on the left side more maybe with Bruce Irvin in there instead of Chris Clemens. All right, before we move to the Sonics, we're going to make our quick predictions for the Hawks game and then talk about who we'd rather play if we win, the 49ers or the Packers in the game tonight. So I think that it's going to be a tough game. They're obviously a really good team. They earned that number 1 seed. But I do think the Hawks match up well in the secondary, and I think we'll be able to run the ball against them pretty well. So I'm going to put a prediction at 24-21 Seahawks victory.
Yeah, I got to go with Jackson too. The matchups I think are more favorable for us than them, and also the fact that the Falcons have a 2-0 record against the remaining teams in the playoffs, and the Seahawks have a 5-1 record. So obviously we had a tougher schedule. The Falcons kind of got it on the easy end, and we have a tougher schedule next year, undoubtedly. But for my prediction for this game tomorrow, I got to go with the Seahawks 28-27 in a close one. So I think it'll be a great game all around, though, and look for the Hawks to if the Hawks get out to a fast start, I think they'll just run away with it because the Falcons, I don't think they're meant to play from behind. But look out if the Falcons get off to a fast head start. So to start about the Sonics news and everything, just big news coming out this week that Chris Hansen is trying to buy the team from the Maloof family, who owns the Kings right now, and it's well known across the league. The Maloofs are very undecisive, and they just go back on their word and just kind of crazy people.
Yeah, so earlier in the week, the first report was that the Chris Hansen and the Seattle group offered $500 million, and it broke immediately, saying it was already done. But then it kind of went back and forth, and that's part of because just the nature of reports, they're not really official yet, and also that, as Marshall was saying, the Maloof family, they're very indecisive. They can't seem to make up their minds on anything. And so that $500 million number kind of went away. And the recent report is that the Maloof family was starting to shop the Kings around to other groups, and that's when Chris Hansen and the Seattle group offered $525 million, which is the new number. And a source in California says that deal is a handshake deal right now. So it's been done through handshake, and nothing's been signed yet. but it does bode well for us that there's supposed handshake deal.
Yeah, but the Maloofs they just can't let go of the team, and they're just so kind of clingy, and they want some control over the team, and that's kind of their debate with the Seattle group. They're just trying to figure that all out. And also, news has come out, within the last day or so that this Sacramento group is trying to get together and kind of buy the Kings and keep them in Sacramento and actually build a $400 million arena in this mall complex kind of thing that's I've heard is sparsely attended, so I don't think it would have a huge impact on anything. But, apparently the source said that the deal between the Maloofs and the Hansen and Chris Hansen was supposed to be signed and announced early next week. So if it's not announced then I think we can look more into the Sacramento group and their bid to buy the Kings.
But one thing that I'm sure a lot of people are wondering about is if we do get the team, what's going to happen, whether they're going to play in the Key Arena or the new arena being built. And the plan right now is, if we get the team, to play in the Key Arena for the 2013-2014 season and then see where the building's at. If it's completed, obviously, then they'll play there for the next season. But they are prepared to play 2 seasons in the Key Arena before moving over to that new arena. But either way, I think the top priority is just to get the team here. It doesn't really matter where they play, in my opinion. I think getting a team back here would obviously be good. And after what we went through, I really do feel for the Sacramento fans. But that being said, I want the Sonics back for sure.
Yeah, definitely. But obviously these are all rumors right now and aren't confirmed at all. But just make sure you look out for any rumors or anything that are coming out early next week. And there's also been some pictures of Seattle Arena, the design and what it's kind of going to look like. They've been released a little bit, and it's kind of got like a smokestack design, but it definitely looks very nice, and just gives even more incentive to kind of want the Sonics back and everything like that.
And one of the more interesting points I actually heard about the deal was that Isaiah Thomas was quoted. I don't remember whether it was on Twitter or an actual report, saying that the Kings, the whole team, was told that the deal was done, and Isaiah was quoted saying that the deal is done here. He thinks the deal is done. So all the Kings players are clearly prepared to move, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the deal is anywhere closer than it has been. It's just an interesting little note to add.
Yeah, and I think if we would be getting this Kings team, it's kind of a young team. DeMarcus Cousins, Isaiah Thomas, obviously, Tyreek Evans, some other. I think Terrence Williams might be on the team, or he might have moved on. But I think if we get the Kings, it's definitely a young team. We could get some more high draft picks, and it would definitely fit in with the new arrival in Seattle, as it's a young team and then a new city that they're playing. I think it would just give them a fresh start and some new energy, kind of like the Sonics did when they moved to Oklahoma City.
And as Marshall said, the core of the team is young, but the star of the team, the best player on the team, is really DeMarcus Cousins, and he's been kind of a hotly contested player recently because his physical talent is all there. He's posted a lot of 20 and 15, 25 and 15 games this season, so he's clearly there from an offensive and rebounding and even coming along from a defensive standpoint. But the question has always been his mental game, because he's really had some trouble. He's been suspended a couple times already this season for conduct detrimental to the team, which is really not something you want to see from a young player. And it's gotten so bad to the point that the Kings have actually been shopping Cousins to a couple teams, mostly towards the Celtics. But so you could see a possibility of a trade happening there, but they also don't want to give him up without getting too much in return, because he is a really talented young player.
Yeah, exactly. I gotta agree with Jackson. They just gotta throw in his little Boston sports right there. The Celtics and Patriots looking good. But overall, I think the Maloofs, I hope they don't just mess around and back out of the deal again. I just want the deal to get signed in the end, because that's when it's official. And if it's all just rumors, you don't know which rumors and sources to believe, because of course the Maloofs can back out at any time. So
So for the Huskies, we got football and basketball news, but I think we'll start with basketball. The Huskies didn't really get off to a good start this season, but they have started 2-0 in conference play, which is a really positive sign. And their last game, they actually got some national TV time on ESPN2, and they came out with really good energy. C.J. Wilcox improving, NJ improving, lots of guys showing that they actually do have some potential. And we're hoping they can continue the hot start tonight in a big game against Stanford, which is in Palo Alto. So hopefully they can continue the good play and start off 3-0 in conference play.
Yeah, I think as of lately they started very poorly on the defensive end. And, Romar, I don't know, I just can't get the gist of him if he's more of an offensive coach, defensive. I think he's more defensive, but it just hasn't shown as of lately. But I think Desmond Simmons has really become the lockdown defender and really come out of his freshman year, and he's started to prove himself and proving that he can shut down anyone. So Stanford has some pretty good big men on the team, and look for Simmons to body up on them. Also, Aziz Njai played very well last game. He was running the floor pretty well, getting those rebounds, gobbling them up, and he's actually developed pretty well over the season. And obviously, as Jackson mentioned, it's a great 2-0 start to the Pac-12 season, and I think a 3-0 start would be awesome to the team's confidence, and I think it would be the first time in about 20 years or so that it's happened, or maybe even longer than that, and it'll just give them a huge boost.
And so talking about improvement for the players, as Marshall was saying, NJ is really improving not only defensively but on the offensive glass, which is a big place that improvement's good. But Abdul Gaddy, watching him throughout his Husky career so far, I've never really been too impressed. But this year he's really started to come into his own a little bit more and show that he has some leadership qualities. But one player I've been really impressed with when watching is the freshman Andrew Andrews. He's really shown a lot of energy on the floor, and Romar has gotten mad at him a couple times, but every time I see him play, he just makes things happen out there. He's a lot more electric than Gaddy is. Gaddy's kind of just a slow, control the offense kind of guy, but Andrews is making plays in transition. He's just making more and more things happen as he matures.
Yeah, I think Gaddy had some huge expectations coming in as a McDonald's All-American and being committed to Arizona before he decommitted and actually chose to go to attend college at UW. And I think he's shown some more energy as of late. He's trying to dunk over people like in the Cal game. He had a breakaway dunk in I think one of the previous games, and but I think Andrew Andrews provides that spark and energy, and I think once he gains more confidence off the bench and kind of comes into his own, he'll be a very, very good player, as he was a great 3-point shooter in high school and really was the star of their state title contending team in Oregon. So I think once some of our younger players can mature and start to develop and play more confident, I think the Huskies will kind of take off, and look for Scott Suggs, C.J. Wilcox, and some of the other leaders of the team, such as Gaddy, to mentor these players and help them mature.
Yeah, and one of the things that I've seen recently is one of the keys to why they've been starting to play better is they've just been starting to play a little bit looser. They've become a lot more free with the shots. They're not putting up bad shots. They're just not as hesitant as they were early in the season. The team's still pretty young, even with some of the guys more being not the freshmen last year like Desmond Simmons and Scott Suggs, but they're now they're sophomores, and they're getting a little more mature and not nearly as hesitant on the offensive side of the ball. And so Scott Suggs has been shooting the ball pretty well lately, and the offense has just been coming along there. So I'm hoping that can continue and they can get a victory tonight against Stanford.
Yeah, I think also, this would obviously be a huge victory before they come home next week. And also on the recruiting front for basketball, obviously we have two signees in Nigel Williams-Goss and Darren Johnson. The Darren Johnson being a shooting guard out of Sacramento, and Nigel Williams-Goss being out of Findlay Prep, Nevada, Henderson, Nevada. And I think both those players will come in next year and immediately contribute. And also the biggest target left, obviously, Aaron Gordon. I mean, that kid is just a straight-up baller and just can do anything you ask him to. Play defense, dribble a ball, anything like that. He just plays a 3-4 hybrid, can shoot it. Obviously very athletic, can dunk over people or do anything like that. But I think it comes down to Arizona and UW for Aaron Gordon. As Kentucky, I don't really see factoring in with all the recruits the commits they've already gotten. But yeah, it'll be a tight race between Arizona and Washington for Aaron Gordon. And other than that, I think we'll start to move on to Husky football, and there's some big news in Husky football this week as well. Might not look like it, but on the front, but there's really some interesting developments. So on the Huskies football news now, I think they had a mediocre season. It was disappointing that we only were 7-6. I kind of expected 8 or 9 wins out of this team at the beginning of the year. I had high hopes, and I think the team did as well. But with some poor play from Keith Price and the offensive line as well, it hurts to not have Doug Nussmeier as well, as he moved on to Alabama and of course won a national championship in his first year there. But I think overall there's a lot of room for improvement. Our defense also improved greatly. We are getting a great recruiting class, one of our best ones in the past 10 to 20 years. It's a great class. But first off, I just want to mention it, talking about recruiting class, there's a huge talent in town this week for the Huskies, with 4 recruits from down south, actually. Those being Reuben Foster, inside linebacker, number 2 player in the nation to some recruiting services, 5-star. I mean, this guy's an all-around baller. His neck is just huge. It's about as big as his head, thick as his head. We also got Maurice Swain, defensive lineman, Joe Sanders, offensive guard, and Josh Outlaw, who is the offensive guard as well. So it's definitely some meat up here right now, and according to their Twitter accounts, I think they're all having a great time so far. And I think UW, their coaches have really impressed some recruits on their visits so far in the recruiting season, and obviously these are all Southern guys, so they're not used to the cold, but I think they could get used to it eventually, and I'll be talking with some of these guys this week, and I'll give you some updates on them.
And I think one of the big things is that these guys they're in positions that we need help on. The defensive ends like Maurice Swain that could really help with the pass rush, and obviously the offensive line didn't play as well as we would have hoped this season. So guys like Sanders and Outlaw, if we could get them to commit, they'd be really big helps, because obviously everyone needs help in the offensive line, but especially us after the down season that we had this season.
Yeah, and on the subject of the offensive line, I think we have a really young group, and they're maturing. I mean, there was a ton of injuries on the line this year, and I look for Cazzetto and his group to improve these young offensive linemen and make sure Keith Price is protected next season. But although a positive of the offensive line is that they did a great job in the running game, leading Bishop Sankey to a great season, higher, more rushing yards than I think anyone would have expected. And I think Bishop Sankey's primed for a great season next year as well. I mean, him and I think teams will be looking out for Sankey a ton, but also I think now that they're looking for Sankey, it'll open up the pass more, and look for Keith Price to kind of have one of his 2011 seasons. I really hope he does, and I think Marcus Tuiasosopo and the new hire for QB coach will help him out a lot, as he was a great Husky QB.
Yeah, and as Marshall was saying, Bishop Sankey, probably the brightest spot for the Huskies, at least on offense this season. So hopefully he can have a season kind of similar to what Chris Polk had been having in the previous years. But one of the interesting developments is whether Price is going to be given the job or whether it's going to be a QB battle between him and Siler Miles, because both guys have obviously shown potential. I mean, Price didn't have as good of a season as he would have wanted this season, but the year before he obviously showed that he can really play. So if he can get back to that level and the offensive line can be there, then I think he'll probably win the job. But I do think Siler Miles is good enough to take it from him. And if he does, that would mean he's playing at a high level, and that would mean that hopefully he can continue that in the season.
Yeah, I think Keith Price has a little seniority here, as Miles would only be a redshirt freshman next year. But I think Skylar Miles also adds another aspect to the game. He's 6'4". He's a good runner. Was great in high school in Colorado, and he's I think he's a pretty good passer as well. Was an Army All-American. He's learned under Keith Price this year. Obviously, can get some more advising from Marcus Tuiasosopo. I mean, I can't stress enough how great of a hire that was to replace. Not replace, but change his QB coach from Eric Kiesau, who moved to wide receivers, who had never coached QBs before, to Marcus Tuiasosopo. And also think Marcus Tuiasosopo will help out in the recruiting front as well with Miles Jack. And, I think the recruiting is hot right now, and make sure to look out for that. Ryan Turman, a walk-on commit from Interlake High School, has been hopping on all these players, trying to get him to sway to UW. He's worked on Jermaine Kelly, cornerback commit this year. He committed last week, actually. And Turman has gotten to be pretty good friends with him. So look for Turman to help out with some more recruiting efforts. But, I think Huskies program looks good right now. I think people calling for Sark's job are kind of crazy. I wrote an article about that about a month ago or so. So check that out, and I think the Huskies football is heading in a good direction.
Yeah, talking about Sark's job, there were a couple reports out there that he might be heading for the NFL and get some interviews there, but then he came back and told Washington that he's definitely here to stay, which is a really good sign that he wants to be here and that he's ready to help us improve in years forward.
Yeah, so thanks for tuning into our first podcast. Gonna do this monthly brew. Look for us to get one out late January as well. We'll talk about obviously there'll be some more Sonics news there. Huskies commit news, Seahawks, see how they're doing. But thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
And make sure to like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at Seattle Sports Soup. Thanks for listening, guys.